wants to record it to the computer, he tells me. For me, it is 3 minutes yet to the hour, but the recording has begun. I am very happy to see you all here, and I would like to especially tell Mukuka I am very happy she came as guest today to our meeting, and I hope that soon she will become one of our members. And Graham would like to.
Svetlana says.
Can you co-host? Can you record them?
I can if you'd like me to, yes.
Yes.
Can make me co-host. I can also record.
So, Witty Storytellers online. Now we are in our 3rd year of chartered club, and we all tell stories, personal stories mostly, to each other and learn and improve our storytelling skills every time, every day, even if we are not at Witty Storytellers. I will tell you later about the Pathway Story Swap online, which you see above my head, and that is the beautiful advertisement or flyer designed by Asa, who is from Witty Birds. And next meeting, I hope, you will all consent to do that, swap each other our pathway stories. We have many stories to tell. So even those who go to Carol Online Alliance meeting this Sunday, and tell a story, can tell another story here in our club. We have a full meeting today, and we have a Toastmaster of the evening, who is not other than our Sergeant of Arms, Zaldi. Zaldi, could you unmute yourself and go?
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Witty Storytellers Online. And we'll get things going as we have 3 storytellers for this day. And first storyteller is delivering a speech from Dynamic Leadership number 4, which is researching and presenting in 5 to 7 minutes. And her title is Meaning Making Machine. Let's all welcome Magda Van Ruyen.
I will time you, Magda.
Thank you. Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, I don't know if there are any guests. My story today could be your story. I am going to tell you something fascinating, and I'm going to question my machine that is trying to find meaning in life. And maybe you will think a little bit about that too. I am going to show you a couple of photos, and you can pretend we're sitting around the barbecue, and I pluck these photos out of my back pocket to show you, to prove a point. My story will include the stories of 2 other people. One is a reporter, and the other one is none other than Professor Robert Sapolsky from Cornell University. It is a research project, but this is all about storytelling. First, I'm going to share my screen with you, and I want you to take a moment to look at this image. It's carefully selected for your entertainment. I bet you your brains are looking at those red dots and wondering, where's she going with this? what is she going to tell me? It's looking rather morbid. And my question is, do we have a morbid curiosity? Is this driving us all the time? You know, when I drive around the motorway and I see an accident, I would tell myself, you're not going to look, you're just going to drive. Blinkers on, you're not going to look. And then I found myself rubbernecking to have a good look to see what's going on. What is going on with me? I know reporters say when there's blood, when it bleeds, that leads. Are we after blood? What is our story? And then I thought back about the times, this is a photo from Mandiace, and those waves rolling in. I remember my husband and myself sitting glued to the TV, watching the same images over and over and over again. It was as if my brain is hungry, that I couldn't get enough of these violent images and the aftermath. The same thing happened in Katrina. And I thought to myself, those poor people. And I had all these mixed emotions. This is in Haiti. And then, of course, in Christchurch, where I lived, we experienced the first 7,000 earthquakes. It's a totally different thing if you are part of it. But I had to ask myself now, when I saw those 7 storms in the ocean bearing down in America, and I was looking at it and I was thinking, what is going on with me? There's not the same reaction. My brain is just saying, get on with it. Then I realized, you know, the external impulses that we're getting, are we getting impulse overload? And I want to show you this little video of this guy over here. And before I put it on, I want to tell you, this is a reporter, and he's totally going over top with his story. He's standing there, of course, the wind is blowing, but he's showing people how he's trying to keep his balance in this massive wind. And then in the background, watch what happened. His words are not so important, but what is really important is the fact that the 2 guys in the background just had a normal walk. They were drinking a soda. So some of the external impulses that we're getting lied to. We are showing bits of a scene where it's really bad. And our brains are getting tired of being told who moved out, who stayed, the cat on the roof, the last rescue, whoever important person said. And I thought to myself, maybe it's just morbid curiosity, but what is my meaning-making machine doing about all of this? So I went to Professor Robert Sapolsky, that's done intensive study about the limbic system. And when we're seeing something new, there's a lot of blood flow to the areas in our brain where we've got our memory bank, as well as our amygdala that is part of the fight and flight. But this is the thing, because of our hippocampus, these images are getting packed down because of the novelty. We release dopamine, that's helping us to remember, and it's going on all the time when we see novelty, something new. And then, according to Professor Sapolsky, when we see in our brains, we've got this now here in the visual cortex, all chemical signs, self-Banda Archie. And now we see another image, and we pull it up here in our visual cortex, but it's not as bad as Banda Archie. So our brain is telling us, take a yawn. You've seen it all. Don't worry about it. You're not in danger. You can just stroll off. Your life is okay. Does that mean that we don't care? Is the meaning of that is that I don't worry about the people? Not at all. But it's a totally different story when someone close to you die than someone far away. And it's only your prefrontal cortex that are really involved in the thinking process. In conclusion, I will want to tell you it's time now to relax. You are okay. I am okay. We're all okay. It's part of our survival mode. This meaning-making machine is doing us a massive favor. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Hi. Okay. I forgot I was the Toastmaster.
Toastmaster. I am not very good.
Okay.
I am not very good in showing time. Can you be showing the times next? Zaldi or someone else?
Yeah, I can do the timing, Julie.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Carol.
Okay, our second storyteller is going to deliver from Innovative Planning Path, and it's her 14th speech project from that path, and it is about our project number 14 in that path, which is using descriptive language. Time is 5 to 7 minutes. Let's all welcome Svetlana Rakhimova.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. Dear fellow Toastmasters and guests, I didn't know I was a poet. I discovered it this summer while I was in my hometown of Samarkand. One day not one day. For 4 days we didn't have internet at home. And I had to work in a coffee house on my laptop. And one day when I was quite tired and I was, collecting my paraphernalia and packing up and leaving the coffee house, at that moment, some jolly people were gathering and they were talking about poems. And I said, as a matter of fact, I translate poems. And they said, but are you a poet yourself? I said, no, I've never written any poems in my life. And they said, well, if you wish to stay with us, you can do that. You're welcome to stay. And I said, I don't really have time and I'm tired, but it's all right. I'll spend maybe 10, 15 minutes with you. And there was something in that company. It was like Toastmasters. They were like-minded people. There was a lot of banter, a lot of jokes and laughing among them. And they were talking about poems. They were reading each other's poems. And I was given a couple of poems to read. Well, I must say I'm good at reading poems. And I told them that I would experiment with the poems that I received. I would read them in the manner that real poets read their own poems. And I read the poems as Russian poet Yesenin did, or Russian poet Bella Ahmadulina did. And they said, we have never heard this kind of cantion, this kind of poem reading before. I also managed to surprise them with a quote from Joseph Brodsky, who said when he was receiving Nobel Prize for Literature, he said that poetry actually accelerates mind. They like that. And then they added me to their Facebook group. And then I received a portion of random words. That's what they do. They give out 7 random words, and you're supposed to write a poem. And I wrote my first poem. With my second poem, with a second set of random words, I became a winner. And then I wrote my third poem, and then I wrote my fourth poem, which was a long poem. And today I'm going to read my maybe sixth poem. And this is also my second long poem. You know, a Russian poet, Nikolai Gumilov, said that everything in this life has a purpose, but we don't know the purpose of the divine poetry. What do we do with poems? Nothing. And I said to myself that I actually can do something with a poem which I like. I can translate it. But this time, I'm reading you a poetry which I authored myself. The random words were oblivion, fireworks, old age, gift, detective, and book. Oblivion, forgetfulness, is only an illusion. The universe of memory is full of moments. The sparks of synapses are fireworks, emotions. The texture of neurons looks like nebulas of stars, flickering from afar. We carry universe inside us. Is that an exaggeration? 100 billions of stars, the neurons. Give or take a few. Oh, wow. Isn't that a gift? Here is the book. Just copy all the poems. And book of life is your detective novel, where thoughts and actions turn the pages. The history, the laws of metaphysics, I call them fires of Prometheus, that change our vision of the God, the judge, the father, the creator, the friend. Forget the hells of fire. God is love, as Jesus said. Albert Einstein and Grigory Perelman are modern heroes. First formulas and then the visual images. All is relative, as Albert said. Reality depends on how you see it. And Grisha Perelman has entered history by saying, I don't need a prize of $1 million. I figured out how to rule the cosmos. He gave the gift of knowledge to those whose mind is open to the future of mankind, where old age is ascension, is gift of dreams fulfilled, of healing, understanding, the gift of friendship, love, appreciation. Hey, poet, tip the scales of the planet, human to human, homo homini, may be a gift. And poet grabs a pencil and a paper and flies into his own Star Trek. He knows, omnia mea, mecum porto. I carry all I have with me. That's it.
Thank you, Svetlana, for that poetic speech. And now let's head on to our third storyteller. He's going to deliver from the Competent Communication Manual, the last speech, which is inspire your audience. It's from 8 to 10 minutes. And his title is, What Would Ida Say? Let's all give a round of applause to Graham Kearns.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters and guests. Tonight, I want to tell you a story of grit. I want to tell you a story of determination, of courage, of gambling it all on the toss of a dice, as it were, of facing down hostility armed with nothing more than a sense of humor and an unquenchable desire to see more. I want to tell you a story of a heroine. I want to tell you of Ida Pfeiffer. Of who? I suspect few people here have heard of Ida Pfeiffer, but to me she is, well, something of a hero, and someone whose sheer oomph is something that I'd like to emulate. Frau Pfeiffer was born in a time when women were supposed to be devoted to Kinder and Kutsche and Kirche, or children, kitchen, church. But instead, Ida Pfeiffer, having outlived her husband and having sent her strapping young lads out into the world on their own, decided to travel and then to write about it for profit, to fund even more travels. Think of her as being the world's first travel blogger. She travelled for the sheer joy of it and yet found a way to make it pay, which is something that I'm still struggling to do. Ida Pfeiffer has been called the first woman to make travelling her life's work. She became a celebrity, famous to the new mass audiences that the media of the Industrial Revolution and especially of mass printing made possible. Her books became international bestsellers, translated into European and non-European languages. And yet she was a relatively poor widow in a society that saw her role as staying at home, wearing the widow's weeds and remembering her place. So what drove Frau Pfeiffer? Well, essentially it was wanderlust. She'd been born into the Germanic equivalent of the Victorian era, and in many ways the Biedermeier was like the Victorian age on steroids. A key concept of the Victorian and Biedermeier worldviews was the notion of separate spheres, the idea that men and women had entirely different areas where they were to be active, and that those areas were dictated to them by biology, but also by divine will. To do anything different was not only potentially scandalous, it was in fact blasphemous. And yet, after living through them for a great part of her adult life, Ida Pfeiffer would break out of all of those restrictions. After a loveless marriage, she was widowed at a relatively early age and was free to travel. Her first trip to the Middle East to visit the Holy Lands, because the religious motivation suggested the respectability required of women at the time. Frau Pfeiffer took in the places of traditional pilgrimage, but after seeing the holy places and shrines, she decided not to go home. She was going to keep going, headed off on a side trip to Egypt and Rome, lasting 9 months before she returned to Vienna. Now, once she was at home, she sat down and in a blaze of inspiration compiled all of the notes that she had scribbled in 14 notebooks into a 2-volume bestseller. She had discovered the formula that she would use from then on. Writing of her travels sold quite well, and she used the proceeds from those books to fund further travel. Her books were praised for their simple, matter-of-fact reporting, especially on things that famous male authors just simply neglected: the life of women and families in those countries, the domestic realm of those faraway places. She had a keen eye for detail. The books could essentially be read as tour guides for trips, real or vicarious, to exotic destinations. She went to Iceland in 1845, but after an epic bout of seasickness, travelled next to Scandinavia and then headed home, where once again she published her travel books notes as a book. After being home for only 7 months, Ida set off again in May 1946, this time on a much longer trip to circle the world. She boarded a Danish ship bound for Brazil, but when that ship hit terrible storms off the east coast of South America, she didn't cower below. No, instead, like Odysseus, she had herself tied to the mast so that she could experience the full measure of storm and tempest. Once, when she was taking an excursion through a rainforest, Ida Pfeiffer was suddenly confronted by a bandit who threatened her with a knife. How did she react? She pulled out her own knife and stabbed him. It worked, but after this, Ida Pfeiffer carried pistols in her travels instead because they were much more effective. She even made her way to Baghdad, where she visited a harem. Now, this is something that no male European would have been allowed to do, and it was a sensation for her reading public. Ida Pfeiffer then trekked to Persia by camel. Before leaving, she had all of her notes shipped home because they were vital for the book that she planned to write. And then, like many an air traveller today, her luggage went missing. You know those notes that she'd shipped home for safekeeping? They weren't there. She had to wait and wait and wait for 18 months before they finally turned up. I have to tell you, every time I think of that story, I am tempted to go and do an extra backup on my computer just to make sure. But the notes did eventually arrive, and she reworked them into Ein Frauenfahrt um die Welt, or A Woman's Journey Around the World. In 1851, Ida departed for London, launching what would become her second around-the-world trip. It'd be 4 years before she returned to Vienna. At 54 years old, a venerable advanced age for the time, she travelled to Singapore and to Malaysia, going to places that the colonial administrators feared, including Sarawak on the western coast of Borneo. After the East Indies, Frau Pfeiffer then went to San Francisco and toured Mexico before visiting Niagara Falls. Sort of roundabout way of doing it, but she went to New York City and then returned across the Atlantic, finally reaching home in 1855. Despite struggling with malaria, which she picked up during one of her travels, one last journey awaited her to Madagascar, off the coast of Africa. There, she unwittingly got involved in a coup against the Queen of Madagascar and also became deathly ill, possibly with the malaria that had troubled her for years, or possibly with cancer. I mean, we're talking in the 1850s, medicine wasn't exactly state of the art. In any case, she returned to Vienna to die in October of 1858. So what's the significance of this amazing figure, other than that she is an amazing figure? Well, Ida Pfeiffer helped usher in an age when even ordinary people could travel and explore. Those who read her books saw a world of possibilities opening up before them, a world that wasn't the unique preserve of extraordinary explorers, but a world which we could venture into. And yet, she was a widow of modest means, bucking all the traditions of her hidebound society and not letting those traditions and conventions get in her way, not one bit. That's why she's a heroine to me, and why I'd like her to be your inspiration as well. Next time you have an idea, but you lack the oomph to carry it through, think of Ida Pfeiffer. Next time you feel that you need to conform to what society expects, remember you can do more. When faced between staying on the well-worn path or striking out on a new venture, ask yourself, what would Ida Pfeiffer do? Because there are alternatives to the ordinary, and you owe it to yourself to, at the very least, explore those options. I'm not suggesting that you should simply throw caution to the wind and pursue life-changing opportunities on a whim. What I am urging you to do is this: consider what is important to you. Plus, do a plus and minus assessment. If the minuses are all about what other people will think or what's normal, don't let them be a millstone around the neck of your dreams. Be like Ida Pfeiffer and be brave. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Graham, for introducing us to Ida Pfeiffer. And
am I, by the way, the only one who's hearing some very strange audio in the background? Oh, whatever it was, it's gone now. Sorry, I just had somebody capturing a seal in the background. I have no idea what that was about. Never mind, it's gone now.
Okay. Next up is our table topic segment. And to do the honors is Magda Van Ruyen.
As the table topics master, I've got some really interesting questions today. How much time do I have?
How much time do we get? 15 minutes?
15 minutes?
Yes, 15
Usually
minutes.
we let speak everyone who didn't speak or doesn't have a role, at least.
Good. I just want to unpin Graham because he's taking up my whole screen through no fault of his own. Good. I want to know from Nadia.
Sorry, just before you do, I'm going to have to leave because I'm getting some very strange audio. I will reboot my machine and come back in a moment. I do apologize.
Okay, not a problem. Good. Nadia, I am very much aware that we give the topic first and then call out the name, but there's the reason for doing it that way today. Because I'm going to ask you a probing question. And the probing question is, how would you be remembered when you're gone, when you passed over to the other side? What do you think people will say about you?
Thank you, Madam Table Topics Master. I love this question because this is a project that many people are given either when they're in school or they're learning, they're trying to define themselves. The rule of thumb is to write out your obituary, and then if you're not measuring up to it, start working towards that. So I will go with what I would like people to say about me. I like that one of my strongest traits is my integrity. And my second strongest trait is my compassion. And everything that I try to do in life is to help others become their best self. I enjoy giving people the resources and the tools to either further their careers or get back on their feet, or whether it's working with prisoners trying to reintegrate into society. I try to plant seeds in the community and really live by the notion that if you work to make your community better, and then that community works together to make the city better, and that works to make the state better, so on and so on, planting small seeds can lead to a major change throughout the world. It might be slow change, but change nonetheless. So I hope in my little corner of the world, when I'm no longer here, I leave a legacy of helping people, living by example, and inspiring others to whatever it is that is your gift, work towards it, hone it, share it with the world, and wake up every day trying to answer the question, how can I make someone's life better today? And I think with that, everyone will have a strong, positive legacy when they're no longer here. Madam Table Topics Master.
Thank you. I could never have guessed that I'm going to ask the perfect person to answer this question. Seeds of life, the seeds that we are sowing. Tell me more about those seeds that are really important to you and that you are adamant that you would like to sow in your life. And the person who's going to answer that is going to be Makuka, my fellow ex-African friend. Coming from Africa, Makuka, you're on. What types of seeds are you going to sow in the lives of other people?
Sorry, would you just repeat the question?
What types of seeds will you sow in the lives of other people? What are the really important things that you want other people to incorporate in their lives?
Okay. In the world in which we live in, it is important that we live collectively as a whole. I believe that living as a community is one important and vital thing needed in order for a society to thrive. Because in that way, they will depend on each other and they'll love each other. And some of the seeds that I would really want people to dwell on is forgiveness. We are all human and we err, and to err is human, but to forgive is divine. And through this, it is important that in each and every one of us, we carry that view of having a forgiving heart, because we are all bound to make mistakes. One other thing that is important to have a seed with all human beings is having mercy. Forgiveness and mercy go side by side, and it is imperative that when a person asks for forgiveness, you as the person who's the receiving end should also be merciful, should be able to forgive somebody. Because if you don't forgive, then that doesn't work well. And it means that the person asking for forgiveness will not be at peace if they're not forgiven. Over to you, Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you so much, Makuka. Now I'm going to be a little bit silly. It is the year 2050, 50. And you are going to use this little device, but you can't say it's a bell. I want you to use your imagination and tell me, what are you going to use this for? I'm going to ask Moses.
Can you please repeat the question, Em? I just came in late.
It's the year 2050, 50, and you're going to use this device in your everyday life, but you can't say it's a bell. Use
Okay.
your imagination. Tantalize and titillate me.
Okay. Madam Table Topics Master, I have a little device, and it's the year 2050. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the advice. My house is filled with virtual robots. And every time I use the little device, I can just press on it. It will serve me. It will look after the children. It will prepare my meals. And it won't replace my wife, of course, but it'll be a virtual robot. The virtual robot will prepare my meals, and it will speak to me using music. As I'm a fan of Vivaldi, the robot will play Vivaldi for me. As I'm a fan of videos, it will have video conferencing as I can watch and listen to Vivaldi. So just to summarize, the little piece of equipment that I will use will run all the robots in my household in 2050. And of course, I'll be about 80 or 90 years old by then, so I'll need the robots. And so they'll play my favorite music, Vivaldi. Back to you, Madam's Table Topics.
Thank you. Zoldy, can I ask you a question? Helen, you also speaking. We're getting out of people now that's got a speaking role. Zoldy, can I ask you a question?
Okay, go ahead.
Good. A zebra skin. Without killing the zebra, how would you use a zebra skin?
It's a very tough question. Zebra skin without killing the zebra. Well, that would require some advanced surgical techniques to remove the skin and let it grow back so that the zebra doesn't die. And that might be in sometime in the future, and probably we would all be living immortal lives when technology reaches that level. So if that can be done with a zebra, maybe that would be experimented on a zebra. So it can also be done with humans, and we can have replace our skin and have eternal youth. So back to you, Table Topics Master.
I think that was really a great question, a great answer. Thank you, Zoldy. I have time for another one, and I am going to ask Julie. Julie, it is the year 2050 again, and you are still alive, and you need to advise Toastmasters International how to improve Toastmasters. What will you say?
2050 and I am still alive. Very wonderful. Thank you. And what I would advise, but I hope they won't need it, because until then they would have changed it, to change their logo. Toastmaster is where leaders are made. No, I changed it yesterday with painting. Toastmaster are where speakers are made. Toastmaster where friends are made. And for me, Toastmasters are mostly friends. Friends who help each other to progress. It can be even leadership eventually, but that would be just one small part of it. When I really needed it, every time I needed, Toastmaster was there to help me out. And from last 2 years, when I begin pathways, at least, even more than before. But even before, I had people helping me. Eventually, they said, Julie, you are wonderful. This year, it was best. meaning that last year, when he told me the same thing, I was not so good, like he told me. And this year, just a few days ago, I was all down and didn't know what to do. And then Fabiola took me after a meeting Sunday and told me, let's speak. And gave me the incentive, that push I needed to begin my new journey.
Thank you so much. Is there time for one more?
Yes.
Good.
We are early.
I need a volunteer for this one because I think it's a rather difficult one. I'm going to
Me.
Me. Who's that?
Michelle in audio.
Hi, Michelle. Good. Yes, you. Debate the fact that the Earth has got no moon whatsoever.
Let me see if I heard that right. Debate the fact that the Earth has no moon?
Yes, correct?
Debate.
Yes.
Are you saying prove that it has no moon? I'm not, because a debate
Whatever
is...
you want to do, Michelle. You can do pros and cons. You can do whatever you want to do. The Earth, it's got no moon. Tell me about it. Debate it.
What is the Earth? And what is the moon? What is the sun? If we believe in not actually a growing number of people who are saying that all of these are just creations of our minds, and in fact, everything around us is simply a creation of our mind, and we all live in a matrix which our mind has created. What is outside the matrix? Nobody can really say. If you remember watching the 1990s movie with Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne, the Matrix is the only, it is a creation of minds to keep people within certain boundaries. But the real reality, and I use those words intentionally, the real reality, nobody really knows. And sometimes when I watch us out in the physical world or maybe online, and even right now, this is a very surreal experience where I can see you, but you cannot see me because I have no webcam. And I was just realizing, wow, that's a different reality now. I am seeing, but they can only hear me. So what is in their minds when they only hear my voice? That could be a different, I could be making funny signs at you right now. I could be sticking my tongue out and you wouldn't even know. I could even be flipping you right now with some nasty gestures. You wouldn't even know. So it's an awesome sense of maybe this whole world, this entire universe is really just a creation of the mind. And maybe there are several other versions of the universe that we don't even know. So as far as the moon and the earth and the sun, who knows? Back to you, Madame Toastmaster, Table Topics Master.
Thank you so much. We know the truth, Miss Michelle. You're sitting there in the matrix in your bikini, and for that reason, we can't see you. It's nothing to do with your computer. I think my time is up. Am I correct? Yes. Back to the general evaluator at this point in time, is it? General evaluator? Not. Back to the Toastmaster.
Galdi, you're muted.
Okay, thank you, Magda, for that very wonderful and fun-filled table topic segment. And now I'd like to ask the timer to keep the report.
I'll be
Carol?
very happy to. give you your report, Mr. Toastmaster. Let me give you the times for the speakers. Magda came in at 1 second past 7 minutes. I don't know how she did that. It was amazing. Svetlana came in at 6 minutes and 38 seconds. And Graham's speech, which was allowed a little longer, came in at 7 minutes and 53, just below the 8. And for our table topics, wow, they have all done so well with that plethora of intriguing questions. Nadia, 2 minutes and 3 seconds. Makuku, 1 minute and 25 seconds. Moses, 1 minute and 7, just made it. And Zaldi, you just made it as well with 1 minute and 2 seconds. Julie, 2 minutes and 14. Well, we're stretching the limits. But boy, oh boy, Michelle came in just under the 2.5 minutes at 2 minutes 27. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Carol, for that report. And we have one more functionary as we have a video monitor for today, Svetlana.
I think we did better today with our backgrounds, with our presence. I don't see any major setbacks or shortcomings as to how people's video cameras are set. Probably Nadia, I mean, I don't mind it, you look cool, but you could probably set your camera a bit higher so that it's more or less level. And we are enjoying beautiful virtual backgrounds as well, so we're mastering the virtual background function of Zoom. I think some of us forgot to turn off their cameras when we were doing something, or we had to leave our seat for a few seconds. Just bear in mind that you can do that. Also, the host of the meeting, whoever, not just the Toastmaster, but maybe a co-host, should be aware of the sounds and just mute the sound of somebody from whose microphone the noise is coming. Other than that, one of our best meetings technically. Thank you.
Okay. Next up is the evaluator of our first speaker. Let me call on Helen Brownlee.
Thank you. What an interesting topic, and how beautifully it was illustrated. The meaning-making machine. When I saw that as the topic, I had no idea where Magda was going when I knew that it was a research project, and I thought, I've never heard of one of these things to research. But of course, it was the brain. I've seen other speeches of Magda, and she always uses photos very effectively, and she has done that again in this speech. The photo, as they say, tells 1,000 words, and it links exactly with the message that Magda is trying or is sending to us. I also really liked the use of language that Magda has, like impulse overload, morbid curiosity, external impulses. They're very graphic language, and they get the picture in our mind. There was excellent pace in this speech. The rate at which you speak makes it very easy for us to listen to. There is just one small point for improvement that I would suggest about your pace, is that early on you hammered us with a lot of questions, but it would have been better if you'd given us some space to think, now what do I think about that question before you threw the next question at us? Because I was thinking, oh yeah, okay, oh, I've missed 3 questions. So the pace that you speak at is great, but if you left a longer pause after your questions, we could actually become even more involved in your speech with having got our brain to think what we're thinking about it. Your personal goal for this speech was how to bridge the gap between dry research and storytelling. I think you did that very, very well, because this, talking about the brain, could be a very dry subject. But the way you introduced it using the photographs of the dramatic incidents and stories from your own personal stories certainly gave us an understanding of the brain, but didn't dry us off, bore us and say, oh, really? Thank you very much, Magda, for a very interesting speech.
Now, thank you, Helen, for that evaluation. Now let's call on the evaluator of Svetlana, Carol.
That would be. Thank you, Toastmaster Zelty. I will start the timer myself. We enjoyed a fabulous story today from Svetlana. It was a poem within a story within a story, very cleverly rolled together in only Svetlana Rakimova way. We know her style of speech. It's very comfortable, it's alluring, and it brings us to the point of the story that she wants to get across. At the beginning, it was a very quiet, measured, and structured way of speaking. And that set the scene for us because we were learning the background of what it was that Svetlana has been learning to do. And that was, of course, to write poetry. There was some delay in the connection early on, and that kind of made it a little difficult for me to hear, but I persevered. One of the things that I liked next about Svetlana's speech was the way she changed the pace and became even more excited as you were drawing us in to knowing what was to come. This gave us the gist of your message. And you had a good use of facts along the way to help us think, oh, there's a lot of research gone into this, as well as it's an actual story. She's really authentic in what she's telling us. A point of improvement here was, normally I see you so far back from the screen and I can see all your gestures. And today you're right up close and I didn't see any. However, it didn't detract from the message of the story because it was very well told. You have a very expressive voice. And then we were delighted to hear the poem written by Svetlana and spoken by Svetlana. And here's my challenge for you. Try to step out of that quiet, contemplative voice and bring in some of that power that we know resides within you. Some of the things that you told us were fleeting and I didn't have time to catch them. So could you repeat the name of that Russian who gave you the quote? Thank you so much for your speech today, Svetlana.
Thank you, Carol, for that evaluation. And for our third speaker, Graham, we call on Nadia to evaluate Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and especially you, Graham. I always look forward to hearing you speak, and I was so thrilled to be your evaluator today because you always give us a lesson and great ideas for future speeches. I heard before the meeting that you are redoing your entire CC manual and redoing it based on the feedback that you received before. So you gave this speech apparently about 2 years ago, and using the feedback from that speech, we're here again to see an improved version. I didn't see the first version, but I absolutely love what you presented today. One thing I love about your speeches is that you're very true to your passion. Every speech has to deal with traveling in some capacity. And I always learn something about the world of travel in some way. So I enjoyed the speech about the bold and courageous Widow Pfeiffer, who was able to step outside the box, step outside the status quo and what was expected of her, and travel the world in the 1800s. That was amazing. I also love your sense of humor. This wasn't a humorous speech, but I did hear pockets of it drop throughout, and it made us all laugh. We were all very engaged. I was looking at the screen in gallery view, and I could see that everyone was tuned in as you were speaking because you're so captivating, and you really took us on her journey of traveling the world in that time period, going against the grain of what people expected. I loved it. You're a very confident storyteller. No issues with public speaking for you that I can see. In your previous evaluation, and thank you for sending me that so I can compare, you just had a slightly reduced mark for gestures. And this speech was full of gestures, and I love them. I don't know if it was natural movement or you rehearsed it, but it came in right in time with what you were speaking about, and it gave it that much more punch. The only recommendation I would have regarding your speeches, and maybe it's hard because we're on video, but be mindful of the direction your gestures are going in. We read left to right. That could be left to right. I don't know how you're viewing it, but your speeches were kind of going right to left. It looked in the opposite direction of maybe the way you might have intended when you were giving the speech. And when you were only using one hand to do a gesture, all of your speeches were on the right side of my screen. So from your viewpoint, whatever side the water is on, that's where all of your one-handed gestures were. So I don't know if that's something you might want to vary in the future also. I love the story, but once I got to your message, I kind of wish you spent just a little more time on your call to action because it was so powerful. We probably had about 7 minutes of Widow Pfeiffer's story and 1 minute of your call to action for us. And I was so wrapped up in the story that I wasn't really looking for a message initially. And then once you got to it, I wanted you to spend a little more time developing it. But overall, you're a very strong storyteller. You always give us something to take away and learn from. I want to learn more about her, and your skills are something that many of us aspire to. So thank you for sharing with us tonight, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Nadia, for that very comprehensive evaluation. And before I call on the general evaluator, Carol, could you provide the time provided by the evaluators?
Absolutely. I'll be very happy to do that for you, Mr. Toastmaster. Helen, you had 2 minutes and 39 for your evaluation of Magda's speech. And I took 2 minutes and 34 seconds to evaluate Svetlana's speech. And Nadia, you had 3 minutes and 27 to evaluate Graham today. Well done. Back to you, Zaldi.
Thank you. Thank you. I had this the order mixed up a while ago. Should have called you the timer after all the evaluators. So now it's time for our general evaluation, and to do that for this meeting is Michelle Alba Lim.
Thank you very much, Zaldi. Michelle Alba Lim with audio only. Yes. First of all, because I have a tendency, and I've noticed several general evaluators do tend to forget the Toastmaster. I would like to give focus first on our Toastmaster. I commend you, Zaldi. You were very smooth. I've seen you, I've seen and I've heard you serve as Toastmaster before. I believe you've grown tremendously. You were so smooth, you were so polished, and your screen presence. I wish you could see me right now. I'm showing how I saw your screen presence. You were sitting up. You were just better framed this time compared to the previous times I've seen you. And yes, indeed, you did
interchange or reverse the order, but the way you handled that, for anyone who was just a guest, they wouldn't have known that you had actually overlooked calling the evaluators first. You were very smooth. When you realized that you had forgotten them and you'd already called for the meeting roll reports, you just said, and now let me call on the first evaluator. That was great. Great job, Mr. Toastmaster. And now for our speakers. Obviously, there isn't time for me to give detailed comments to all three of them, but I just wanted to say very quickly, listening to all three speakers, I just felt proud. And maybe because I didn't have audio, I could just sit there and gawk. I think I had occasionally I would have my mouth open and just sit there and just be amazed at how good storytellers we have in our club. So well done, all three. And special mention to Graham, because I know, and maybe a few others know, but I know that he just stepped in to give a speech a few minutes before the meeting began, because I couldn't. Well, I was willing to, but it would have been weird giving a speech with audio only. And he stepped in. So considering that he just stepped in, excellent job. But all three speakers were really good. And the evaluators as well. We often hear evaluators just saying all the great things, and that's it. Well, our three evaluators all cited excellent points for each of the speakers. However, they also went an extra mile. They offered suggestions. For example, with Helen, the pause after asking the questions, for Carol, the distance from the camera and having a little more power in Svetlana's voice, and with Nadia, even Graham, she complimented him so well, but then she also offered suggestions. And her suggestions were so specific about the angle of the gestures, the direction, and the speech organization. So fabulous job. And now I think I'm saving the best for last almost. I love the table topics. I really, really love them. Magda, you have a fabulous imagination. You're so creative. And your questions, all of them were just really great. The question you gave me, that just kind of, I just let my imagination run wild. And I think everyone else had that same or similar feeling of, wow, this is a tough question, but we love it. And all the table topics responses, I can't speak for myself, but all the other 5 table topics responses were all really good. I was writing notes and I was thinking, wow, these are amazing responses. Special mention, Zaldi, you were very creative with your answer. And even Moses, I think that part about the bell was missed maybe, because he was responding about a different device, but still it was a wonderful thing. And I was thinking, yes, 30 years into the future, we will all need those robots. And so wonderful job. So let me see. I think I've covered everything. And our timer, I loved your timing device. And I am now at 4 minutes and 22 seconds. So I believe I should return control back to our Toastmaster. Let's welcome back Zaldi. And you're muted.
Okay, thank you, Michelle, for the comprehensive general evaluation, and been a great meeting today. And it's been quite a while. I've been a Toastmaster for this club, and I welcome the opportunity. And thank you, Julie, for assigning me to be the Toastmaster of the meeting. And with that, I'd like to turn over the meeting to Julie.
Thank you very much. Again, storytellers overdid themselves. Not only we came to the meeting, but we have guests. And even those who had problems came. I would like to especially thank Michelle, and tell her that her audio voice is wonderful. Very speaking. I never heard that just your voice, and I would say make a podcast, because you are really good for them. And I see Graham nodding.
Discovery.
I would like to tell you, all of you, to realize that when someone speaks and others put what is called a gallery view, we can see all of you. So every time someone speaks, don't forget you are seen, you are looked. For example, me, most of the time I look always in gallery view. So when you do any gesture, or hide, or go away, or do like this, or whatever you do, I see. When you nod, when you laugh, not only I see, I have to admit, sometimes I take screenshots. So I can remember all of you having been here. Yes, thank you. Like this. And we can do different gestures and show that we are funny, and someone will take picture of us. I know that sometimes Aldi does, not always, but sometimes. And Carol, who shows us a lot of beautiful timing devices. I would like to speak to you a little bit of the next meeting and meetings, and of my DTM project, if you let me, just a short time. My DTM project will be Pathway Story Swaps Online, doing with different places and different environment and by different experience. And the first one will be an online alliance that Carol organizes, and we are already for 30 of September, so we will begin very soon, Sunday morning. For me it will be 7 o'clock London time, 6 o'clock UTC. We will have the yes, the first Pathway Story Swap Online. What is a story? Someone asked me just a few hours ago. A story has a hero or a heroine, and usually in our story it is us. In other story it could be Ida or Magda or whoever. For me it is only Svetlana, who I met her while she told the story in Firebirds. We have a lot of heroes in our lives, but most of the time, and in Story Swap, it will be us. So a hero has to be vulnerable, so we can like, because if she is or he is boasting all the time, I was a pathway guide and everything went well and I had no problems and I helped a lot of people, that is not an interesting story. The interesting story is when you got into problems and didn't know how to get out and had to fight with obstacles and difficulties and go deeper and deeper in problem. And then, of course, someone can come to your rescue and help you and get you out of the deep down where you feel, and then you can go up and prevail. That for me is a story. not telling that pathway is everything wonderful and we had no problem with them and Toastmaster and so on. So that is for me a story. Pathway story swap will be changing our experience in pathway with each other. And yes, the 11th of October, our storytelling club will also tell pathway stories to each other. So whether you can be this Sunday or not in the online Alliance meeting, please come Thursday, our next meeting, and be prepared, all of you, to tell your experience and pathway story. Thank you. And thank you for being here. I would like to ask, before I go, Mukuka to tell me how she experienced our meeting today. Can you speak, Mukuka?
Yes. No, it's been a very good experience trying to learn how people tell stories, a good way to captivate the audience, and just to be a good storyteller. And I also like the table topics because I think they unveil critical thinking in somebody expected to talk there and then without having much thought. And I think for me that is a very good thing, which I think I need and can make me a better speaker.
Thank you, Mukuka. Come back. And Moses, you are welcome again, guest. Perhaps you will one time really become member also, like I hope. But tell us what you think about our meeting today.
I responded to an email sent to me by Svetlana, and I didn't know which club this was. So very challenging table topic, very challenging, very, very challenging. And I love being challenged. Because we are communicators, we are to have like a bag of vocabulary by which to respond to challenging topics that Magda gave us. So that's what I really enjoyed today, was being challenged with something that you have to think outside the square. And that's what I really enjoyed today, Julie. I'm sorry I'm not committing myself, but I'm just letting you know what I enjoyed today, the challenge of answering a table topic.
Thank you. We learned a lot today, I think, from each of you. And I would like just to go away. And before I go away, to tell that we chartered the 16th of September 2 years ago. And I believe that Witty birds, who Svetlana grew from our club, will probably charter the 18th September of 2018 soon. So we will have a big festivity sometimes, I hope, together to celebrate as it could be our kid, our child who grew up like we grew up from Firebirds, and Witty birds grew up from more or less from our storytellers, because they now tell all those stories like we tell stories. Svetlana, would you like to speak a little bit to finish?
Yes. There are so many things I want to say at once, so I need to prioritize. It's an exciting time, and we were told that we have to wait for another few hours. Another few hours. And those hours are never ending. But probably yes, when I think that I will receive we will receive the news of charter, my heart starts pounding faster. And I think it's such a happy moment. You know, I know that we will have like a new impetus in everything that we're doing. There are a lot of educational plans pending and lots of leadership projects, and we want to put in as many ideas of our members as we can. And we're already using some very innovative collective leadership tools in our agendas, Facebook groups and pages. I have the ambition for both clubs, Witty Storytellers and Witty Birds. I know that one day we will change the name of Witty Storytellers Club, and that's fine because people are confusing them. My ambition is to have waiting lists for our clubs, because our clubs are really useful. Storytelling is the name of the game in so many fields nowadays, in marketing, in self-employed, in market industry, everywhere, interpersonal communication, families. We need to be able to tell stories. We need to be able to wrap our messages in stories, become more eloquent, more empathetic. I mean, I can go on and on and on, but you understand what I mean. We are about